The common folk kneel in awe before their guardian, a colossal 100 tons of ambulatory devastation. They hail him as Redeemer, deity, bulwark against the encroaching void. Yet within the pilot's chamber, Baron Terran senses the terror lurking under their adoration. As hunger ravages the land, he comes to understand the Imperium's true priorities, and human existence ranks low among them. The call of obligation murmurs at first, then escalates to a roar. Their expressions linger in my memory above all. Prior to the accolades of my lineage, before the rituals of ignition, before the intense merging with my knight, those faces. The inhabitants of Virilia gazed at me with what I formerly deemed veneration, but now perceive as dread. They would fling their scant harvests in the path of the booming strides from my quistorius pattern knight-errant, more like placating a wrathful deity than saluting their defender. My forebears assured me this was fitting. This formed the inherent hierarchy. The lower classes were meant to labor under the loom of our supremacy. For 10,000 years, House Terran has served as the steadfast barrier shielding humanity from the abyss that seeks to devour it. And across those 10,000 years, we have exacted our due. The moment I initially linked with righteous dominion stays as sharp in my mind as if it happened yesterday, even after almost 2 decades. The sacristans toiled through the darkness, blessing each hinge and actuator with holy oils, murmuring machine code incantations to calm the engine's soul ahead of our union. I had readied myself over years, my form and psyche refined via endless ordeals. As the 9th offspring of Baron Alcidus Terran, inheritance seemed unlikely, yet I underwent the clan's rigorous schooling all the same. 7 siblings had already claimed their roles as pilots. Just Lucius, the eldest, stayed by our sire's side as the destined successor. Stepping into the shrine, I sensed the gaze of countless forebears upon me. Our lineage's outpost on Virilia, distinct from our chief estates on Valuris, appeared humble amid Imperial elite's grandeur. Carved into the cliffside above the expansive wheat plains that sustained a dozen adjacent worlds, Castellan Terran still loomed formidable over the natives. Its towers of adamantium and rock thrust upward like indicting digits toward the heavens, while its roots burrowed far into the fertile ground, tapping the world's abundance. At the sanctum's heart stood the throne mechanicum, illuminated by the blood-red glow of scanners and mechadendrites that writhed like cybernetic serpents. I recall the initial chill of its alloy pressing my flesh. I recall the neural connector easing into the grafted socket at my neck's nape. Then came the onslaught of 10,000 years' worth of recollections and burdens surging into my awareness. The link between rider and walker transcends mere linkage of flesh and mechanism. It forms a profound merger with every prior throne-bearer. Their histories and biases sear into your thoughts like cauterizing marks. I experienced my great-grandfather quelling a serf rebellion from 2 centuries past. I sensed the justified thrill as he unleashed his thermal cannons straight into the uprising's core. The agony of the perishing rang like harmony in his enhanced hearing. I lived my kinsman Tybal slaughtering Xenos marauders who menaced the outlying hamlets. I tasted his sour frustration when the locals bolted from him in horror post-rescue, their rudimentary psyches blurring savior from assailant. Beneath it all pulsed the essence of righteous dominion's machine spirit, timeless and arrogant, appraising my fitness to don its legacy. It bore down on my psyche like tangible force, hunting flaws, testing for uncertainty, for faltering, for any shortfall from unwavering faith in our heritage's excellence and our mission. I surfaced from that initial merging with my core self preserved, but forever transformed. The sacristans proclaimed it a robust connection. My sire rested a palm on my arm, his armored glove laden with command's gravity. My surviving kin regarded me with blended admiration and jealousy. Solely Lucius appeared uneasy, his stare delving into mine for a shadow he dreaded discovering. That evening, secluded in my quarters, I envisioned striding over Virilia's farmlands, yet I inhabited no mortal frame. I embodied a titan of steel and ceramite, every footfall pulverizing the lush dirt underfoot. The villagers fled my approach, not in structured offerings, but in chaotic frenzy. I startled awake, soaked in perspiration, pulse hammering within my chest. I brushed it off as mere residue from the integration rite. The sacristans had cautioned that initial period would prove taxing as my brain acclimated to the nerve linkage. Yet the visions persisted. Evening upon evening, I peered upon Vialia's denizens not as their sentinel, but as their harbinger of ruin. And as nights wore on, I started catching their utterances. Initially, just inarticulate wails of alarm, but over time, those visions merged into fervent supplications, directed not toward me or my lineage, but straight to the God Emperor, urgent cries for rescue from their oppressive liege lords. I kept these nocturnal visions to myself. Revealing such frailty risked drawing unwanted attention, possibly even charges of psychological unfitness, and a knight whose psyche faltered could hardly wield the authority of his station. I'd witnessed the fate of those whose bond with the throne mechanicum soured. They lost their titles, banished to the depths of Castel and Terran, their legacies erased from the revered corridors of our forebears. Rather than dwell on it, I immersed myself deeper in my responsibilities. I scouted the edges of our domains, pursuing the savage orc marauders that sporadically burst from the thick eastern woodlands. I kept vigil during the grand harvest rites, my noble steed, righteous dominion, looming protectively above the gatherings like a vigilant guardian. I accepted the yields of crops, minerals, and serf toil with grave nods of sanction, fulfilling my role as anticipated. For a spell, the visions faded. I persuaded myself they were merely the teething troubles of a fresh-thrown pilot. The expected adaptation phase, while the mechanicum throne reshaped segments of my brain to sync more seamlessly with the venerable machinery. After all, I was Baron Gas Terran, ninth offspring of Alcides, commander of the esteemed knight-errant righteous dominion, devotee to both the Omnissiah and the Emperor. My destiny felt straightforward, my role beyond doubt. Then the plague struck. It started in the eastern farmlands, a faint tarnish on the wheat that expanded with terrifying rapidity. The farm overseers exhausted every method to curb its progress. They torched tainted areas. They deployed alchemical remedies from the Mechanicus outposts. They even brought in hybrid seeds from distant planets, aiming to cultivate immunity. All efforts failed. In just 1 month, half the yields were ruined. By the second, catastrophe loomed. My sire summoned an assembly of the knights at hand. Back then, only I, Lucius, and our fourth sibling, Marius, remained on Varelia. The rest were deployed in sector-wide offensives, bolstering Astra Militarum forces or heeding distress signals from allied worlds. Alcides appeared more aged than ever, his burdens carving profound furrows across his features. We convened in the vast chamber of Castel and Terran, encircled by the standards and spoils of our lineage. Servo-skulls glided quietly between us, pouring recaf into chalices and tending the massive forges that warmed the echoing vault. Our patriarch held his tongue at first. Then, he ignited a hololith emitter on the table's midpoint, revealing the blight's reach over our territories. The crimson blot marred almost 80% of the tillable soil we safeguarded, and it kept advancing. The surviving fertile patches could scarcely sustain Varelia's inhabitants, much less fulfill our tribute demands to the Imperium. It was Lucius who shattered the quiet. Ever the realist, the heir presumptive, delivered his assessment with the icy precision that had won Father's esteem. "We need to trim the populace down to viable numbers," he declared. "What's left of the crop might sustain roughly 1/3 of the present serfs. The others qualify as expendable now." I recall how my gut churned at his pronouncement. Not that the idea shocked me. Imperial aristocrats have long regarded lives as assets for oversight. But those visions surged back instantly into my thoughts, replaying the serfs' frightened gazes toward my steed in the night. Their invocations echoed once more, begging not for defense against outsiders, but against us, their vaunted defenders. Still, I held my peace. What other path could I propose? Famine would claim them anyway, sans provisions. A controlled purge, at least, promised swiftness, order, a modicum of compassion versus the lingering torment of hunger. Such reasoning quelled the unrest stirring within me. Marius floated the notion of seeking urgent provisions from our estates on Viteris. Our origin planet brimmed with abundance, bound to yield some surplus, right? Yet, as he voiced it, we recognized the transport hurdles rendered it unfeasible. Imperial convoys strained under martial payloads and war zone requisitions. By the moment reinforcements from Viteris could dock, the folk would have withered from want. Ultimately, we resolved to enforce rigorous quotas without delay. The unspoiled remnants would be reaped and locked away beneath watchful sentries. Every abode in our shielded enclaves would get portions scaled to their utility for our realm's endurance. Artisans with expertise or rare talents would claim complete shares. The ones judged superfluous would get, it was just sufficient to keep them alive, though scarcely more. Such a harsh equation, yet one the Imperium applies ruthlessly over its countless planets. The resilient endure, the frail fall away, and from this forge, mankind persists. I departed that gathering uneasy, yet committed to our chosen path. What I hadn't foreseen was how the common folk would respond once the cutbacks were revealed. For ages, Virelia's inhabitants had embraced their role unquestioningly. They labored in the farmlands, they offered tribute to their overlords, they surrendered their young to the Imperial Guard whenever the levy vessels arrived. In exchange, they gained safeguarding from the Knights of House Terran. This pact stretched back as far as the Imperium's founding, but now that pact lay shattered, we couldn't shield them from famine. And in that lapse, a core shift occurred in how they viewed us. The initial uprising erupted in the village of Harrow's Mill. The district enforcers, starved and dispirited themselves, soon buckled under the assault. The food reserves were plundered. The meticulously devised distribution scheme turned futile amid one evening of frantic mayhem. Word arrived at Castel in Terran by first light, delivered by an out-of-breath courier who'd galloped non-stop through the darkness. My father's reply was immediate and absolute. This defiance wouldn't be tolerated. Discipline had to be reimposed. The masses needed a stark reminder of their station. I still recall his precise command as he faced me. His gaze, mirroring mine, gleamed cold and unyielding. "Gas," he declared. "Deploy righteous dominion to Harrow's Mill. Set a severe precedent with the instigators. Guarantee no further disturbances." I inclined my head in obedience, though a shiver gripped my core. This was my obligation. This defined knighthood in House Terran, upholding authority, imposing the elite's decrees on our subordinates. Yet, even so, the visions had resurfaced the prior evening, fiercer than before. I'd envisioned myself traversing the hamlets, my thermal lance humming with restrained fury. I'd caught the cries, sensed the machine spirit's approval as it tallied the end of lesser souls, and I'd roused slick with icy perspiration, bitterness lingering on my tongue. But I kept silent about it to my father. Rather, I headed straight to the nocturnal shrine, where the tech priests were readying righteous dominion for action. The colossal engine loomed in its harness, energy conduits and supply hoses linked like a newborn tethered to its dam. Save that this offspring existed solely for conflict, every feature crafted to deliver destruction. The linkage rite was abbreviated this time. The crisis's press eclipsed the standard rites. When the neural link engaged, I sensed the customary press of the machine spirit against my mind. But something additional stirred now, a vibe of eagerness, of craving. Righteous dominion grasped that we weren't advancing against greenskins or rebels or alien adversaries. It understood our mission was to chastise those we were meant to guard, and it relished the prospect. This insight unsettled me beyond words, even inwardly. Yet there was no leisure to ponder it. The shrine's vast portals were parting, exposing Virelia's muted dawn glow. With a mental impulse, I urged the night into its initial heavy strides, the chamber's flooring quaking under its colossal mass. Reaching Harrow's Mill would demand hours, despite the night's formidable speed. As I steered righteous dominion along the twisting hillside trail from Castel in Terran toward the plains beneath, I sought to steel my resolve for the ordeal to come. I'd taken lives previously. Naturally, all night pilots had. But those were foes of the Imperium, perils to mankind's stellar rule. This felt utterly alien. These were our subjects, pushed to the brink by deprivation and dread. I assured myself I'd show restraint. I'd pinpoint the riot's agitators, the ones who'd spurred the frenzy, and dispatch them swiftly. A plasma discharge ends in a flash, after all. No suffering for them, and their passing would fulfill a goal, reinstating calm and perhaps preserving additional lives over time. This was the justification I held fast to. As righteous dominion pressed onward relentlessly to Harrow's Mill, the outpost came into view from a few kilometers off, a grouping of simple habitat blocks and crop-handling plants tucked into a gentle depression. A faint wisp of smoke curled from its heart, a sign of the night's turmoil. Nearing further, I anticipated finding the residents barricaded inside, shrinking from their master's retribution. Instead, I beheld crowds of folk amassed in the central plaza, numerous clutching farm tools or crude arms. They weren't in retreat. They stood prepared. Via the augmented sight arrays of my A's darkness fell, I discerned distinct features amid the throng. Fear lingered in their expressions, undoubtedly, yet resolve shone through as well. These weren't aimless rabble-rousers. They were folks pushed to the brink, choosing the swift end from a warrior's arsenal over the agony of gradual famine. In that instant, clarity struck. My mission wasn't to reinstate calm, but to quash defiance, to underscore that their existence paled against the prestige and command of House Terran. I positioned righteous dominion right beyond the village's edge. The colossal battle engine loomed above the highest buildings, its silhouette draping the assembly like a pall. Through the outer vox emitters, I spoke to the inhabitants of Harrow's Mill. Under Baron Alcides Terran's decree, I proclaimed, I've come to seize the culprits behind the pilfering of Imperial supplies and the slaying of devoted guards. Hand them over immediately, and the remainder of you shall escape punishment. Whispers rippled across the group, yet none advanced. Rather, an elderly figure shuffled forward, his spine curved from years toiling in the soil, his palms roughened and scarred. Yet his gaze remained sharp and steady as it fixed on the immense silhouette of my knight. We've got nothing more to yield, sire. Quote 1. The harvest is depleted, devoured by famished bellies. Regarding the guards, they struck first. We merely protected our own. Quote 2. Established procedures exist, distribution schemes in place. Your actions endanger all of Varelia beyond just your circle. Quote 3. Behold our plight, sire. Quote 4. The task is complete. Quote 5. Well done. Quote 6. The throne alters them eventually. Quote 7. You'll take over Lucius's responsibilities starting now, and upon my passing you'll rise as Baron over House Terran's estates on Varelia. Quote 8. The tithe shall be fulfilled. Quote 9. The administratum has assessed Varelia's vital role in the grand design. Allowances have been granted for the documented affliction. The updated quota stands at 60% of the normal grain levy and full compliance on personnel levies. My father paled. Even that diminished grain demand would strip our folk of essentials, and the full manpower extraction, claiming our fittest and ablest hands, would cripple any chance of rebounding from the plague, even if we weathered the urgent peril. That's untenable. Quote 12. We can't satisfy those terms without dooming our domains to collapse. I beseech an exceptional reprieve, to be settled with added restitution once the blight yields. The assessor's face remained impassive. His prosthetic fingers tapped a brief entry into the data slate. Non-compliance with the revised tithe shall be logged as rebellion, he stated. The repercussions for House Terran will prove dire. Your designation as a loyal knightly domain grants minor leeway, but not eternal immunity from the Emperor's verdict. Quote 15. I bow to your ruling, my lord. Quote 16. Varelia's endurance justifies the cost. My father's features grew sterner. Does it truly, he challenged, or have you merely swapped one path to ruin for yet another? The populace endures for the moment, but what about House Terran? What of our 10,000 years steeped in legacy and dignity? I couldn't offer a reply that would appease him. The chasm separating our views ran too deep, our interpretations of obligation and prestige far too divergent. Thus, I inclined my head and departed. I withdrew to my quarters to ready myself for the journey ahead. The days that followed flew by. I supervised the concluding stages of the substitute tithe, giving orders designed to sustain the efforts while I was gone. I informed the household officials tasked with carrying on the duties, stressing the need to handle the laborers with dignity and consideration. And I connected once more with righteous dominion in Virilia. The machine spirit detected the shift in events, the looming dispatch to unfamiliar war zones. It brimmed with anticipation, yearning for the bloodshed on the horizon. I sensed its craving bearing down on my thoughts, attempting to stir the same fervor for slaughter within me. Yet I held firm, holding on to that chamber in the linkage chamber, that modest realm of autonomy I'd nurtured. I'd require it during the year to come. The Empire's leaders would demand absolute submission, the sort that flowed instinctively from knights whose pilots had wholly integrated with their thrones. I'd need to mimic that compliance, all while preserving sufficient distance to stop the machine spirit from fully eclipsing my human essence. Come the dawn of my exit, I positioned myself in the yard of Castel Terran, with righteous dominion towering at my back, already fastened to the enormous carrier deck that would haul it to the awaiting tithe vessels. My father chose not to bid me farewell, his ultimate sign of rejection. Yet, unexpectedly, a sizable assembly had assembled beyond the entrance. They hailed from the surrounding outposts, miners and foragers, plant operators, and farm hands. They watched quietly as the last setups for my sending off wrapped up. Their features were gaunt from starvation, their forms scarred by relentless toil, but their gazes conveyed an emotion I'd never witnessed, aimed at a scion of House Terran. Not dread, not awe, but appreciation. Plain, heartfelt appreciation. As the carrier deck started to ascend, powered by laboring anti-grav engines, the group stirred, not scattering as I'd figured, but lowering themselves successively. Then in swells they sank to the ground, not in the stiff stance dictated by etiquette for lords, but in the profound prostration saved for holy figures and redeemers. The image pierced me deeply. These folks who had borne such agony beneath House Terran's governance, who had witnessed their kin cut down at Harrow's Mill, who had withstood famine and terror and grueling drudgery, now paid tribute to me. Not for my status as their ruler, nor for piloting a knight, but for championing their continued existence. And right then, as the carrier deck surmounted the barriers of Castel Terran and set course for the stars, I grasped the reality that had escaped me and my forebears across 10,000 years. The knights of House Terran weren't divine constructs of steel, nor bearers of the Emperor's verdict. We served as instruments, implements of an empire that prized human existence only in masses, never as singular souls. The heat rays and scythe blades, the energy barriers and unyielding armor, all served not to safeguard mankind, but to impose order, to guarantee the levies were delivered, that the masses stayed subdued, that the vast engine of the Imperium kept grinding on, heedless of the toll in mortal anguish. Yet that needn't be the sole truth. Even amid the Imperium's unyielding bounds, even through the dire bond-linking knight and pilot, space existed for mercy, for acknowledging the worth of those pledged under our safeguard, for prioritizing their well-being over the empty ideals of prestige and custom that had steered House Terran through ages untold. As the air grew sparse encircling the climbing carrier, as Virilia shrank to a verdant orb beneath, I formed a quiet pledge. I would endure the year's duty. I would defy the machine spirit's thirst for carnage. And I would re-enter Virilia, not as successor, not as overlord, but as guardian in truth. I intended to demonstrate to my father, my home, and the entire Imperium that mercy held its own might, that moderation carried true authority. The echoes from Harrow's Mill murmured their endorsement, and for the first time following the slaughter, they offered not agony, but determination. Their passing would gain purpose if I managed to carve out a fresh direction for House Terran, if I succeeded in preventing any other outpost from enduring such devastation. The shuttle linked up with the tithe vessel, an enormous craft set to transport me toward whichever conflict area the department viewed as most desperate for a knight's arsenal. Upon exiting the landing area, an Imperial functionary greeted me. his attire displaying the emblem of the Astro Militarum High Command. "Knight Gas Terran," he stated, his tone sharp and precise. "You are allocated to Battle Group Terminus. Assignment to the Charadon sector. Orc infestation designation B-Hog. Projected campaign length 8 to 12 months. Likelihood of survival 30%. I responded to the details with a simple incline of my head. The functionary pressed on, detailing the tactical aims, the makeup of the battle group, and the hierarchy I'd function under. Yet I paid only partial attention. My thoughts had already shifted to the trials awaiting me, to the delicate equilibrium between yielding to Imperial directives and curbing the machine spirit's thirst for carnage, to the fight to hold on to my core self amid what promised to be vast mechanized killing. When the functionary wrapped up his summary, he regarded me with intrigue. Most night pilots he'd dealt with, he noted, displayed either zeal for battle or worry over the particular foes they'd confront. My composed reception stood out as atypical. "I am not most night pilots," I replied. "I fight not for fame or the prestige of my lineage, but for the endurance of my realm." He appeared momentarily startled by the response, though he soon reclaimed his official poise. "Your reasons hold no weight, Knight Terran," he declared. "Your compliance with orders alone counts." I lowered my gaze in feigned agreement. Let him see me as an outlier, a curiosity amid the typically arrogant and self-reliant knights. It would simplify my efforts if my Imperial superiors undervalued my potential for autonomous reasoning. While being led to my cabin on the tithe ship, I traversed the enormous storage bays holding Varelia's substitute tribute, crates of processed ores, vats preserving the glowing mushrooms, and above all, the hand-picked draftees destined for the Imperial Guard, youths who could have perished from famine on Varelia, but now confronted another form of demise on remote fronts. I halted to observe their handling by Munitorum staff, their identities and backgrounds logged, their physiques checked for suitability, their psyches scanned for flaws or defiance. They appeared terrified, and rightly so. Scarcely any would outlast their duty, yet they'd endure beyond what awaited on a famished Varelia, and a faint possibility existed that a few might fulfill their stint and come back, carrying knowledge and insights to aid their home. That, at minimum, was the reassurance I gave myself as I looked away from the scene. Yet another justification, yet another concession to the Imperium's harsh truths, but it represented the utmost I could provide, the sole action possible inside the framework that had shaped my existence. As the tithe ship detached from orbit and set course for the Charadon sector, I lingered by an observation port, seeing Varelia shrink into the emptiness. At such remove, the plague lay hidden, the hardships of its inhabitants shrunk to a vague notion. Forgetting would come easily, letting myself dissolve into the cadence of conflict and obligation that loomed. Countless night pilots followed that route, discovering meaning in perpetual warfare, in bonding with their war machines, in the straightforward act of annihilating the Emperor's adversaries. But the whispers of Harrow's Mill wouldn't permit such oblivion. They'd accompany me across the fights to follow, an unrelenting prompt of the Imperium's endurance true price, an ongoing push to seek superior methods, even in a structure that dismissed the idea of progress outright. I stepped back from the port as Varelia faded from sight, engulfed by the cosmos's immensity. Before me stretched a year of combat, of clashing with outside threats and the machine spirit of righteous dominion alike. After that, a dubious homecoming to a realm and lineage that might reject me entirely. Yet, I had chosen my course. The thermal cannons of righteous dominion would continue to blaze. The Reaper chainsword would still slice through the Imperium's enemies. I would remain a knight of House Terran, still a tool of immense ruinous force, but I would direct that force with consciousness of its toll, with regard for the existences it touched, with the aim of safeguarding over conquest. And maybe through that subtle shift, I could start to alter the essence of knighthood itself. No longer a deity forged from steel, nor a bearer of divine reckoning, but an authentic protector of mankind. Not dreaded, but truly honored. Not worshipped, but deserving of devotion. Such a vision was a delicate aspiration, readily shattered beneath the burden of 10 millennia of custom or the unrelenting pressures of the Imperium. Yet it belonged to me, and I would safeguard it with the same unyielding fervor that righteous dominion shielded me, cultivate it with the precision the sacristans applied to the machine spirit, and uphold it with the steadfastness House Terran showed in guarding its prestige. Within that aspiration rested not only Varelia's destiny, but the core essence of House Terran, and maybe, in a modest measure, a vision of the Imperium's potential if it recalled its mission extended beyond mere endurance, to safeguarding the qualities that rendered humanity deserving of existence amid the primordial frost.